going on, Nick?
Well, welcome to the McNutt house. My wife and I, Pam, purchased the property about 2.5 years ago. We didn't know a lot about history. In fact, we could care less about history when we bought the house. But it didn't take us too long to realize that it really is a historic property. It's listed on the National Register of Historic Places, along with being a state and county historical site. We got to doing some research and we found out an awful lot about the property. We still are learning. The house itself was built in 1826. McNutt, who is the 12th governor of the state, bought it in 1829. He added on to it in 1832. He was a very wealthy attorney. He joined a partnership with a gentleman by the name of Joel Cameron. And between them, they wound up procuring an awful lot of plantations through the area. The largest was a little over a 4,000-acre plantation called Walnut Hills. The area that you're sitting in right now, at one point in time, is where the houses were for their slave quarters. Later on, there was a garage located here, and suicide took place in that garage. A family by the name of Wrights purchased the house in 1844 when McNutt took office as governor. We know of at least one individual that was not only born in the house, but died in the house. There are stories from when this building belonged to Montessori school system about a little girl. When the kids were out playing, they'd play with this little girl that always seemed to be in the woods. She wore a blue dress, and they'd be called back in from recess, and they'd ask the teacher why the little girl in the blue dress didn't have to come in too. The only problem was nobody could see a little girl in a blue dress. And the story has gone on for about 30 years, 30 to 40 years. We've never had any experiences that you would say were scary in the property, but we've had guests that have told us little stories. They didn't know that it was supposed to have some type of activity. We had a couple of guys staying in the main house, and this is right after we bought the house, he explained to us that he was struggling trying to get the top of the salt shaker off of the thing, and he finally just set it down. The next morning, the top of the salt shaker was sitting next to the body. I can't explain it. Just after we bought the house, I guess we had it maybe a month. And of course, anytime you buy a place, you start inviting the family over to check it out and everything else. And my wife's sister-in-law came over, and she was really excited about the place, and she brought her daughter along with her. She's about 6 years old. Her name's Marley. Marley was fascinated with the staircases. She could run up the stairs, go through the house, down the stairs, and back out. She just enjoyed running around the house. Meanwhile, Pam and her sister-in-law were sitting out on the deck in the swing, and they were talking about various different things, and the subject of the little girl ghost came up. About that moment, Marley comes up behind them and says, "Yeah, her name's Maggie." The two of them look at each other and look at her. "Well, how do you know this?" And she told me. "What else you say?" "I don't know." And off she went to play. Therefore, we now know that the little girl's name is at least Maggie. About 8 months ago, I guess it was, my wife is kind of an amateur anthropologist, and she enjoys digging around, and particularly the side lot over here. And she found some bones. And so she was pretty excited, and she's scraping away, and the bones get bigger and bigger, and she calls me over. It took me all of about 15 seconds to realize this wasn't an animal. And so I told her to stop. We wound up calling the police department. Big mistake. Don't ever do that. Next thing you know, half of the police department is parked out here. Meanwhile, we've got a bunch of ladies that are having some type of a little vent over here in the main house. And they're thinking, my God, it must be a drug bust. So once we assured them, no, it's not a drug bust, we found some bones, well then they suddenly got scared because they thought there'd been a murder. Well, so my wife was prime suspect for about an hour. That was fun. I wasn't allowed to go down there, which was just fine with me too. Yeah. And but they brought in the state anthropologist who reviewed the bones and determined that they were well over 100 years, closer maybe to 200 years old. And so they extracted the remains and they took them off to Jackson for a proper burial, according to them. We heard a story about proper burials over there too. And my wife is still finding log bones, skull, vertebrae, and teeth, and she brings them in the office.
Great.
So, yeah.
There you go, honey, look what I found.
Yeah. So we've only had a couple of folks that have really been afraid while they were here, but they were afraid because they were afraid, not because of an event that took place. So we have had paranormals come in and study the location on 4 different occasions. Every time they've left indicating that it was quite active.
Right.
But again, we haven't had anything bad happen. We don't have angry ghosts.
Right.
At least I know that. So I wish you well, and I hope that you enjoy your time here and it's productive for you.
Hi, my name is Maureen Gates, M-O-R-J-N-G-A-T-E-S. I'm sitting now in the McNutt house. McNutt house is a bed and breakfast tour home. I'm associated with the McNutt house because I run the Haunted Vicksburg Ghost Tours, and it is a featured stop on our ghost tours. It is the most active site in our entire touring. This house was built in 1826. At one point, it belonged to Governor McNutt, who was the 12th governor of Mississippi. The house is one of the oldest properties in Vicksburg. A lot of interesting things have happened on this property over the years. Vicksburg, as you may know, was a turning point battle in the Civil War. The city was besieged for 47 days. But long before the Civil War, interesting things were happening in Vicksburg. Yellow fever and other terrible diseases often swept through the land, killing thousands. Slaves and others died here frequently. The house is very haunted. There are unmarked graves upon the property. There's one known grave belonging to David Weeks McGill, a young lieutenant working here with the Louisiana Heavy Artillery Unit. His grave is well marked on the property. Spirits abound in this area. We have identified between 5 and 6 separate spirits that frequent this area. On our ghost tours and with other friends and associates of mine, evidence has been reported on numerous occasions. Cold spots, noted temperature differentials are quite frequently experienced on this property. EVs, strong electromagnetic readings, and actual photographic evidence are sometimes seen. Probably the most active spirit here is the spirit of what we believe was a niece of Governor McNutt. She died of yellow fever, probably sometime in the 1830s. This little girl ghost is seen quite frequently, particularly by children who have often reported playing with her. Many years ago, this was a private school. Children who came to this private school would sometimes complain to their teachers why the little girl in the blue dress didn't have to come in from recess like the rest of the children did. Children who have stayed at this house have often reported playing with the little girl in the blue dress. In fact, today her name is Maggie because she has communicated this to some of the children she has played with. Maggie is a very active spirit here, and she has been seen, she has been felt, she has been photographed on numerous occasions. But she is not the only spirit here. David Weeks McGill died here after being mortally wounded during the siege of Vicksburg. The body barn that we know of that was buried on the property. He has been photographed. His presence has been picked up by paranormal investigators. And there are others as well. The house is very haunted. It is very active. Spirits abound in this area. They are still present. They are still encountered. Very recently, we still had encounters. Spirits seem to make themselves known to people who are more open to their presence than those who are not. The house has been investigated on numerous occasions by paranormal investigators. I'd like to introduce to you my friend, David. David Childers.
My name's David Childers, D-A-V-I-D-C-H-I-L-D-E-R-S. We're at the location of the McNutt house. We have been here and investigated this place numerous of times. We have been guests here, and some of the stuff that we have witnessed was just amazing. We have witnessed such as full body apparitions from 3 different people behind the chapel area. And the chapel area, behind the chapel area, it actually was a cemetery during the Civil War. The bones have been found back there, artifacts, all kinds of awesome stuff. We have came in the main house and just been in there in a close fireplace, just talking. And we'll look up and the chandelier is swinging back and forth. No one else upstairs, the whole house vacant. We have walked outside and with our K2 meters and just got high EMF fields out there with no electricity around, answering our questions. And just coming here and doing this as a guest, you know, we're experiencing stuff. We've stayed here, heard bumps, bangs. We've heard people talking with their ear, audible, with our own ears. And we've picked up EVPs with our recorders. So one of them saying 5-horse cavalry. Another one, you know, actually saying, hey. One of my friends we stayed the night one night, and one of my friends was laying on the floor in the main house. And she started falling asleep. And next thing you know, she jumps up and runs outside. We had a recorder playing the whole time. Went over the evidence, and there was a female in her ear saying, hey, we have had 3 people actually get sick in the chapel area. As soon as they walk outside, everything's fine. We've walked in there, we've done EMF sweeps of the whole place, and it was low. It wasn't even high EMF reads in there to actually make someone sick. We've had experiences of kids that actually have stayed here at this bed and breakfast that actually want to go down to the bottom level of the courtyard and play with Maggie. Maggie is the most popular ghost known here at McNutt, and she is probably one of the most active spirits here. Kids will here and come and say, oh yeah, I want to go down there and play with the little girl, and the parents are like, what little girl? Oh, the little girl down there with the blue dress on. We have pictures of the little girl with the blue dress on. I've walked in the courtyard and started asking questions. Just got major K2 hits back on whenever I'm asking about Maggie. In the chapel area, we can get back to that. The chapel area it's just crazy in the chapel area because we've had people being touched, hair pulled, pushed. I've been pushed myself. It's crazy how this house is. It's very, very active. Another personal experience that we had in this establishment was upstairs in one of the bedrooms. Patrick Burns came down from True TV's Haunting Evidence and from Paranormal Challenge. He came down and investigated this place with us. And we were upstairs and both saw a shadow figure, a shadow person that was sitting on the bed and just jumped up and went toward the bathroom. We also were sitting there talking, and we looked up at the ceiling, and there was a visible orb about that big. It just showed up there and just gone. So it was good to have him as a witness on that. And do I believe in ghosts? With a place like this, how could I?
We're here at the McNutt house Vicksburg, Mississippi. We have Patrick Burns with us.
Yeah, he's from True TV's Haunting Evidence and also Paranormal Challenge. He was a guest judge on there. Patrick, what do you think about this place, the investigation tonight?
I love it. We had a great time on the investigation. We got some solid EVP evidence on our investigation tonight. I think there's also other stuff going on here. Marley, my fiance, and I, we had a couple of experiences last night when we were here. We had a couple of bottles that were tipped over, and they weren't tipped in the same direction. They were actually crossed over on top of one another. I thought it was very interesting, like, almost as if they were pushed from opposite directions. And then Marley saw a figure looking up the stairwell at her out of her peripheral vision earlier this evening when we were checking into our room. So I think there's definitely something going on here, and we're actually going to end up staying an extra night. We're going to stay here through tomorrow night and conduct our own little private investigation. You know, you get a lot of people around. It's hard to have evidence that's not contaminated. So we'll be really interested to see what we can, just the two of us having, you know, full reign of the house tomorrow night. So.
Awesome.